users. That's all quite blurry compared to the days of the past. And really that's where the notion of the managed services and the outsourcing arrangements come into play, and hopefully sets the scene partly for this session this afternoon. So with me today to talk through these issues in more detail, on my left, Simon Perkins, who has a wealth of experience in the region across both fixed and more recently mobile operations, as the CEO of Hello Axiata company in Cambodia and as part of the broader Malaysian group. I might kick off with you, Simon, before we go around also to the group here in front of us, because we would like to have some questions perhaps during this discussion and to make it more interactive rather than just us talk up here and then leave questions to the end. So certainly at any time during the next half hour to an hour, any questions you might have, queries or comments, please raise your hand and we'll take those as they come. But Simon, as an acquirer of managed services, where do you, in your business, decide where to stop owning and operating a particular piece of infrastructure or service and where to look to a third party to assist?
Yes, I'd probably come from the sort of extreme school of outsourcing, which if I could have a free hand, I'd outsource everything apart from the sales and marketing. That's my sort of ideal, but then my team bring me back down to earth, and practicalities of trying to do that prevail. So we're an operator in Cambodia, one of the most competitive markets in the world. 8 operators now serving a population of 14.5 million, with one of the lowest GDP per capita in the region. So necessity, being the mother of all invention, means that to survive in that environment, you've got to be extremely low cost and extremely focused. And that's what's driven us to outsource in a quite aggressive way as much of the operation as we can, because it drives cost efficiencies and also allows us to focus on the market. And as I say, I would like to do more and more of that. The practicalities are whether there's somebody in the geography that you operate in who can provide you with those services on a cost-effective basis. The only way a vendor can provide those services on a cost-effective basis is he's able to aggregate demand across a number of operators, which in our country they can because there's so many of us. But in some of the geographies they're not, or maybe they don't have the expertise. And we also come back to issues about control. People are very precious about giving up things that they think they need to control and need to own. So there's a balance there that brings you back down to how much you really can do.
I suspect that issue of scale and also of control will be a recurring theme throughout this session. On my right is also Alvin Chung, who's from China Unicom and the Vice President of Wholesale Services there, based in Hong Kong. Alvin, from another side, in terms of a network owner who provides wholesale services as well as enterprise services, perhaps some comments from you at the broad level of how you look to decide whether to insource or outsource some services.
Thank you, Matt. Actually, for our company, because of the customer requirement, last year we have launched a project to work with our business partner to provide a management network services. Because over the past 30 years, China's economy has grown rapidly. There are so many Chinese enterprises find continuous growing opportunity and go outside to other countries for their development. So that for us, we think telecommunication service is a commodity for business and individual. That's why we go outside with them to develop our global network. From our experience, we work with our partner and we leverage our own network presence and and a variety of off-net service, so that we can provide a perfect solution to our customer to every corner of the world. We leverage our each other's strength and weakness. We fine-tune our business model means that because we know for us in the past, we focus more on the network infrastructure building, but we found that capacity, bandwidth alone, we can't make any money. It's a poor ROI product, so that we ramp ourselves to provide some managed services and application. We think that is the only way for us to survive.
I think as a network owner, you're saying that the margins that you can receive and maintain on your network really don't have the long-term future without those extra services that you can seek to place on top.
Yeah, right. Because I just mentioned, we know that the unit rate of the capacity, particularly on the submarine cable system, the unit rate dropped significantly. So that if we just build our network, but what we find that it's long way for us to return our investment. So that even though the top line of the infrastructure, the top line is high, but the margin is so thin. That's why we want to we ramp ourselves to provide some services, management services or application on top of our infrastructure, so that we can make sure we can have more margin gained from the services. Yeah.
And so, Alvin, is that also to enterprise customers or just as a wholesale provider of services?
For us, we mainly target on wholesale customer and enterprise customer because we think, as mentioned, that many Chinese enterprise go outside. When they stay outside, they do more rely on our services, not bandwidth only, but all telecom related services. They request for high availability, high quality, fully manageable seems to be a must. That's why last year we ramped our networks to be able to provide global managed network services.
Simon, you don't manage those networks in that manner yourself, I gather.
No, I think there's a couple of key points in what Alvin said. In highly competitive markets, margins are thin, so operators are looking for any way to, in Alvin's case, add value by providing managed services case, in our case, by cutting our costs, by outsourcing services. It's an extremely difficult process to go through. It took us a year to finalize our managed services contract and to do the vendor selection. Because once you enter into this contract, quite frankly, you're stuck with it, right? If you decide to hand over all of your network operation, in our case, field maintenance, fuel supply, rental management, to a vendor, that's an extremely difficult thing to unwind. So you make that choice very carefully, and contracting that is a massive job. You'll spend a massive amount of man hours trying to draft the contract so that you try and cover most of those eventualities, but in reality you can't, right? So in reality it's a leap of faith, it's a partnership relationship, and there has to be a certain amount of flexibility. But I'm pleased we did it, even though there were quite a few skeptics on the way. My targets, which I set for this project, were a 20% cost reduction over what it was costing us to run these services ourselves, and the same level of performance. Now, I can honestly report we achieved a 20% cost reduction and we improved performance. So, to me, it's a great testament. But it's more than that. I talked about focus on the market. The thing that drove me to do this was more desperation. 50% of my organization was focusing its time on keeping the generators running, keeping the sites on air. It was all wrong when the market was highly competitive and we should be focusing much higher proportion of our energy on the market dynamics. So it was that sort of debate that gave rise to some quite pleasing results.
Well, very pleasing. 20% cost reductions and increased in performance is a double whammy. I'm interested to know whether you thought of splitting the activities even further in terms of who was going to be the choice of supplier for those managed services, especially in running the network. Did you contemplate going to many different contracting parties, or you thought that there was perhaps benefit in having one or two?
I think it's horses for courses, really. We've done the network now. I mean, my next target area is IT. That's a much more difficult one because then you have to make decisions about billing. I'm in two minds about that. You know, is billing a core competence that you wouldn't want to outsource? Not convinced, actually. I think parts of it you can outsource. Maybe you just want to own that customer database and the customer relationship, but the engine and the rating, I'm not convinced I actually need to own that. So maybe there's a different vendor that's the right one for those sort of aspects. How much further can we go? Probably that's it. And the sales and marketing, of course, I want to keep in-house. Finance tends to be a core function, I think. But yeah, the next area for me to look at is IT and billing, and I'm not sure that would be the same vendor.
But you're saying before you might look to outsource those, at this stage, you've drawn the line at that customer relationship, the customer database, the billing. Alvin, how's your experience of whether to pass over that billing function to a third party, or I suspect you would never contemplate doing that?
Actually, I think no single carrier can do all the things. That's why I think outsourcing is the must. But how to optimize the outsourcing, I think the important thing is how to choose the right partner to do that. Because I always think outsourcing is not talking about the financial outsourcing. We want to get a right business partner. We have a common goal. We leverage each other to achieve our goal. So that, but I want to share my experience last year when we've looking for a partner. Actually, in our company, we formed internal team with senior staff of different departments, so that we list out all about the reason for outsourcing, work out evaluation procedure, work out some selection criteria. We set out some goal and expect result, so that we make sure we select the right partner for this outsourcing. We hope that we go for a common goal to get it done.
In fact, I would suspect that the barriers to outsourcing are often those two areas of technical competency and cultural fit, or sort of partnering fit. I know that at Macquarie Telecom in Australia, when we're selling complex managed hosting services to enterprise customers and even some government customers, we find what I might call the cultural barrier to be there, where a large IT department within an organisation is just not interested or prepared quite yet to hand over the responsibility to the managing of their network to a third party. That they still feel a degree and a sense of comfort by knowing that all of the servers in their office are all in that little room down the back in the corner of the office, and they still want to hug that box every now and then and get the comfort from the whirring noise and the flashing lights. Whereas in fact, from a cost benefit analysis, it would make a lot more sense to be able to pass that management function over to a data centre provider like a Macquarie Telecom, or there are many others, where within a purpose-built facility you would have access to continual upgrades of the network that you will require over time, and the headache of managing all of that network is passed over. But But those that are technically competent and would understand the benefits from a technical perspective of doing that, nevertheless don't go down that path as IT managers, because an IT manager without an IT room to see all that equipment sometimes doesn't have a job. I'm also interested in what other partnering issues did you see, Simon, when you were weighing up on the network side as to who to go with?
It's quite an interesting exercise for us. We shortlisted 3 vendors for our managed services evaluation, 2 Chinese vendors, ZTE and Huawei, and an international vendor, Ericsson. When we started down this process, in my mind, I'd already sort of made some sort of decision, I guess, but I was absolutely convinced that Ericsson would be the preferred choice. Because on a worldwide basis, their reputation in this area and the reference checks we did clearly showed them to have some leadership and expertise in the managed services field. But as we got deeper into the process, we realized that actually the key differentiating point was the resources and the capabilities that they had on the ground in country, and how many other networks were they supporting in the country so that they could aggregate their resources across a number of operators. And though Ericsson clearly had the perhaps competence advantage on a worldwide basis, geographically they didn't. They didn't have a strong presence in Cambodia. They weren't supplying networks to many operators there. They weren't doing any other managed services. And then, quite interesting, then we migrated into looking more closely at the Chinese vendors, and in the end we selected Huawei, which was a very high-risk decision. And I remember getting calls from my group CEO in Malaysia saying, "Are you sure you're going to give this contract to Huawei? You need to convince me that you're making the right decision. They don't have a good track record." We stuck with it, and I'm very pleased that we did. And interestingly now, another one of the group companies, Excel in Indonesia, which is a much bigger operation, and some of you may know it, gone through the same process and made the same selection. So it's interesting to see how the Chinese vendors in Southeast Asia, at least now, are challenging the dominance of the big traditional internationals that we know, the Ericssons and Nokia, Siemens, who've had a leadership position in this. So they're developing because of their presence in country. That's where they're getting their.
And also, I suspect in your example, there was some benefits that the wider group saw in perhaps having the same head on the chopping block in each of those jurisdictions in case something went wrong.
We were the first operator to go down the managed services route. I think it was a bit of an experiment that the group wanted to watch anyway to see how it panned out. There was no, direction about which one to go, but there was just lots of questionings when we came up with what was seen as a somewhat outsider choice. Interestingly, price-wise, there was very little differential. Most people would say, well, the Chinese vendors will offer you a much more competitive price. Interestingly, they didn't compared to the Ericssons, but it was a capability question that swung it in the end.
Let's switch gears then away from the management of the network and the physical infrastructure and look more to the future. Alvin, what kind of managed services that sit on top of the network layer do you think will be the sweet spot for China Unicom in the coming years?
Okay. For us, actually, we target mainly on wholesale customer and enterprise customer, so that before we launch this project, we study all the requirement on that and the coming trend. As just mentioned, we don't worry about our infrastructure. We are very good, but how to provide the service on top of the infrastructure and make money is difficult task for us. So that for us, we study, we think about how to provide benefit to us and at the same time to our customer. So that the most important thing is how we can provide the service, time to market, benefit to customer, flexible for the surface expansion, good SLA, something like that is number one task for us to achieve.
I was going to mention one area that Macquarie Telecom decided not to look at managed by a third party, which is an area that I know a lot of other operators, especially focused on enterprise customers in country, would generally choose to outsource, and that is in relation to the customer contact centre. I know we looked at putting that call centre function for our customers out to the Philippines or one of the other more well-known areas of being able to do that work. Yet after discussions with our enterprise customers, they gave a strong preference of having an in-country solution for their contact centre and their customer centre. So intuitively, many operators would think that it's better to go to those low-cost areas where you can have where there is a pool of resources already in existence and good old connectivity there, and to provide that contact centre, that help desk and that help and support, which could have been the Philippines or Malaysia or even some of South Africa's moving into that area, provide those sorts of services. But we've got a very strong sense from our customers that they wanted to have it, to know that it was someone in country and it was nearby. And it's funnily enough, I'm sure that doesn't apply to all jurisdictions or all customer sets, but certainly for enterprise customers and larger government customers, there was a very strong sense that they wanted that in country, which is an area where we found that we didn't go in terms of outsourcing of services. Simon, what would be the no-go areas? You touched on a few before that you thought weren't no-go, and you even talked about perhaps even some of the customer management systems and billing could be done by third parties, or at least outsourced, and not part of your core competency as an operator. What might be the limits of that, do you think?
Yeah, I think the front-end marketing, which is the analysis of customer data, the ownership of the data, the database of your customers. In a prepaid market, that's extremely difficult. Customer data is limited, but you know, over a period of time, particularly through particular vast campaigns where you start to learn a little bit more about your customer, you can compile a database, which is really the only thing you've got of value in a prepaid environment. So I don't think it's really sensible or possible to outsource that. And even the billing system, I've seen some interesting models which are sort of halfway between owning everything in-house and outsourcing it. And I think you're seeing the telecom groups, particularly like us, Axiata, and I've seen it in Digicel, where they've got a number of opcos in a region. They start to consolidate some of these key functions, such as billing, such as CRM, such as CLM, where you're mining customer data in a very specialist, in-depth way, an expensive way, and you need very high computing power to do this, to target offers into the market on a very individual, targeted way. And that to me makes sense, to consolidate that expertise and resource where you've got a group. So we can do it in Axiata, for example, you just wherever you've got the best expertise. All of the operating companies outsource that work to someone in the group. You're not losing it to outside your group, so you've still got that tight control, and it's a differential advantage. If you build up a centre of expertise within the group that's very good at that, you're going to be able to compete in all of the countries where you operate. The tyranny is, transferring typically large amounts of data, and if it's a prepaid system, in real time to a central location, but those barriers are gradually eroding. We can transfer relatively large amounts of data around the world in real time now. So I think you're going to see that, where groups of companies will start to build up centralized expertise rather than outsourcing it to another vendor, where you may lose some of your core competence differential advantage.
Might it be that a driver towards that future is advent of cloud computing and greater connectivity, capacity and security throughout the region?
Definitely. The model I've been very impressed with is Digicel. Digicel operate a number of mobile operations in the Pacific Islands. They're all quite small, and they want to run one centralized billing system out of PNG for all of those operations. The data mining, the analysis for all of the opcos is done in one location, and they've just got to transfer the data to and from. So it's a sort of embryonic, cloud computing solution. I think it's pretty impressive, and I think that's a way that I would look to develop.
Sort of billing as a service across the organisation. Yes. Alvin, any final comments that you'd like to make before I throw it over to some questions?
Actually, just talking about the billing system for us, actually, when we're talking about outsourcing, for us, we think that most of things we can consider to outsource. But when talking about business system, business support system, we don't agree to be outsourced, because we think it's talking about business aspect of your company. It's talking about just mentioned billing, CRM, most sensitive and valuable data here. So that for us, we have thinking about to outsource the system design, but ongoing maintenance, particularly on the system data handling, that's all go to our internal staff.
I might pause there for a moment to take any questions you might have from the floor or comments. Any of these experiences from certainly from Simon and Alvin ringing true for you, or different from the markets that you typically operate in? I think there's certainly differences in terms of the user demand in different markets and different stages of developments. I think we heard that throughout the course of the conference earlier this morning, where the experiences of obviously the user and the sophistication of some of the social media services in Japan, for instance, were different from those of the that we might be seeing certainly in Australia that I see, and in fact have a different flavour altogether from the ones that were operating in Thailand. Any other comments there? Well, I think let's try and crystal ball then as the final few minutes we have left in this panel session on what we might be thinking about the limits of managed services and what kind of activities would be provided by operators as against provided by third parties, and indeed from enterprise and customers as well as residential customers, retail customers, in say 5 or 6 years if we can manage to do that. Simon, what might that landscape look like, do you think?
I think for the telecoms industry generally, this is a scale business now. The only way that operators are going to survive, whether you're in retail operators like us or wholesale operators like a lot of people in this room, it's scale. So you need to be aggregating all of your businesses across a number of countries, across a number of markets, and then centralizing as many functions as we possibly can to get the operational efficiencies out of it. This is a one-way street to me. Margins are getting thinner and thinner and thinner. Services typically are just becoming commoditized. I'm skeptical, about whether you can really ever stop this over-the-top threat that we all face. Yes, we are going to be relegated to pipe operators. I'm okay with that. If there's enough volume in there, I can make a margin. I'm not naive enough to think that unless you're a very big telco group, you're ever going to compete with the really niche content operators, cloud computing operators. That's very much for those specialists. So for me, this is about aggregating scale. It's about taking advantage of group scale where you've got it, and then centralizing all of many as the common functions as you possibly can, because it's a margin game. Lowest cost operator will survive, and there can only ever be one of those.
Okay, for us, management services for us is very important, because for example, for the I take one example, cloud services. In the past, it's not for in the past for telco services, for telco company. There's only talking about infrastructure or some management service. But cloud, for example, it involves the infrastructure, and at the same time involves some platform, the cloud platform, and also some content. So therefore, for us, it's very many opportunity for us to provide not only management service, but also we can cross to another industry to make sure, because we know customer base is is our assets. We have our customer, and we can provide not only telco service, but in the future we can cross to another industry. We can provide different kind of services, such as cloud, for example, so that it's a good future for us.
I think I'd certainly agree that scale is one that one can't fight against. But I also think that there is opportunities for perhaps the more nimble and more focused operators, maybe not build upon their own infrastructure, maybe using the infrastructure of the third parties or the largest operators. I think that in such a fast-moving market as communications, that there will always be a place for very fast operators to come in and provide services as and when customers have that as a demand. I'm thinking in the retail space, you saw the applications developers that are now building business models that sit atop Apple, for instance. But in the enterprise space, in the larger corporate market, I think that as businesses move more and more of their operations to the web and the way in which they deal with their customers as being more web focused, there will be the need to have suppliers of communication services that very much understand the business. It's one thing for the company to understand its business when all of its customers were just those people in its nearby physical location. But now that we have national markets for small operators, where in the Australian situation you could be in a town out of the cities and yet be supplying certain services to customers that are located all around the world. If your business is very much built upon the need for connectivity and the need for good communication to customers, well then you might be inclined to go to a smaller, more focused provider for that service rather than just the very largest suppliers. So I think my view of how it might unfold over the next 5 or so years will be a combination of both the very large and the scale operators that fill the pipes, and with the largest pipe and the ability to fill it the fastest probably wins in that dynamic. But I think there'll also be a place for operators that understand the needs of their customers very quickly and are able to adapt and bend and shape as the unfolding period takes place. So one more chance for any final questions or comments from the floor, and then I think we're going to finish up there, David. Well, thank you everyone for listening this afternoon.